and the environmental analysis associated with this environmental impact statement. We are also the same team that has been involved for the last 3 years working through the planning and environmental linkage process, which has really set us up to come to this point. We're at the public scoping meeting. This is the first official public event of the environmental impact statement. We did post the notice of intent on August 15th of this year. That begins the official 2-year clock to complete this process. The notice of intent describes all of the information about the project and the project to date. And also, as I said, officially kicks off the environmental impact statement process. A lot of what this project will do will build on the work that was already done through the planning environmental linkage process, and I'll talk through a little bit of what that was and those recommendations. The scoping meeting is your first opportunity during this process to begin to provide your input to some of the issues that we'll analyze, issues maybe that we shouldn't analyze, or to provide any other comment to us on things that you think we need to be able to, we should be considering as we go through this process over the next 2 years. The planning environmental linkage process, or the PEL process as we call it, started with a wide range. We looked at a whole kind of universe of alternatives and began to ask increasingly more detailed questions to screen those down. Trying to get to the ones that perform the best and best help us meet our purpose and need. We ultimately got to a recommendation to carry forward 2 build alternatives, and through the EIS process, you always carry forward a no build alternative. So we have 3 alternatives that we're looking at in this process, and I'll describe all 3 of those to you. But to start with the purpose and need. Purpose and need was really, why did ITD want to start this project in the first place? And so we went out and collected existing conditions, data, traffic information, and information about the environmental resources in the corridor, and came up with what it is that they were trying to accomplish. So the purpose statement is, the purpose of the I-15 US-20 connector project is to address safety, congestion, mobility, and travel time reliability for the efficient movement of people, goods, and services on I-15 and US-20 in or near Bonneville County and Idaho Falls. So that's kind of our guiding statement. It has not changed since the planning environmental linkage study. We did look at it again. We worked with the relevant resource agencies to ask if they had comments, and everybody felt like that was still, the mission that we were on. In a little bit more detail, the specific needs related to the project are multimodal capacity and vehicular capacity improvements to I-15 and US-20 to address safety concerns, reducing congestion, both on the corridors and at the interchanges, providing pedestrian and bicycle mobility within and across the corridors, and addressing future travel demand. So obviously we want to make improvements that we can see the benefit immediately, but that future travel demand is for us to look at 2045. That is the forecast year that the Federal Highway Administration has asked us to look at. That's the forecast year that the Bonneville Metropolitan Planning Organization uses to evaluate the value of transportation projects and big infrastructure investments like this to make sure that they're going to have value over time. A few other things about the kind of where we came through with the PEL process. There was a lot of previous public engagement. We had 4 major public meetings, as well as a number of other neighborhood meetings and working group meetings. We got most of those done in person, and as you can see by the numbers there, had quite a few people participating in each of those, more and more interest, culminating in the last one, which was during COVID, so that was the only one that was an online meeting. All the rest were in-person meetings, and we timed those with each of the recommendations that we had to both look at the range of alternatives and the recommendations for narrowing those down. So that was the information that we were sharing at each of those meetings and getting feedback on whether or not we were making the right decisions or what issues needed more consideration. One of the big ones, and this really kind of relates back to our purpose and need statement, was traffic. So as we were collecting traffic data, the top left there shows the 2017 traffic volumes. Green or blue is the best, green is the second best, and as you move your way down through orange, yellow, and red, you can see where congestion and the resulting safety concerns related to congestion are getting worse and worse. The bottom right is the 2045 no build, so this is the assumption that we don't do anything immediately on the corridor, and how will it function at that point. So this was a pretty clear indicator that something needs to be done out on the corridor rather than just simply let it degrade. As we looked at all the different alternatives, we narrowed down to the two, and this really becomes the study area. So for the two build alternatives that we're recommending right now, all of the improvements that we're suggesting are within this area. So this was the area that we both in the planning environmental linkage study started looking at environmental impacts, but also are carrying forward, and as we're providing additional detail in the environmental impact statement, this is the area that we're taking the closest look at. And when I say environmental, it's not just endangered species. It is all the things that kind of fall under the category of environmental, and that different resource agencies, either state resource agencies or federal resource agencies, usually require either their approval or there would be some permitting processes if there are impacts to these. So looking at low income and minority populations, which is through the NEPA process is called environmental justice populations, air quality, farmlands, noise, hazardous materials. The airport has its own whole set of rules that you have to follow if you have impacts at the airport, either to their property or to the runway protection zone. Natural environment also included wetlands, water resources, biological resources, another category for cultural resources or historic resources in the community. Additional protections called 4F and 6F for parks and trails that would have the potential to be impacted, stormwater and hydraulics, and then cumulative impacts. Cumulative impacts is its own category of looking at the physical improvements that we'd be making with this project, but also taking into account any of the other projects that are known or planned in the community and seeing whether those are mutually beneficial or not. And so thinking through what the cumulative impacts on the community would be. So those were the resources we looked at and will continue to look at in the environmental impact statement. So just a little summary here again. Through the PEL process, we ended up with these alternatives. We did the 3 levels of screening, went from 14 down to 10 to 4, and then ultimately picked the 2 that we were recommending to move forward as build alternatives. So of the 3 that we're looking at, the first one is the no build alternative. And maybe I'll modify my statement slightly. Even though the no build alternative does not include any improvements on I-15 or US-20, we do want to account for all of the other improvements that either the city or the county already have planned or funded. And so in the traffic model that we use, we will be assuming this bullet list of about 8 or 9 other projects that could potentially have an impact on how the roadway functions based on maybe, if you're widening in one place, people may make different decisions about how they get to the highway or if they need to use the highway. So we want to make sure that those are accounted for in the alternative. So that is the no build that we will use as the baseline. We also have alternative E3, and it's possible this will get renamed. It's kind of a clunky nomenclature that we pulled forward from the PEL. It might be easier just to call them 1 and 2 or something, but for now, just so there's some consistency in the previous process, this is E3. E3, the basic pieces of E3 is that it moves the system-to-system connection between I-15 and US-20 from exit 119 up to a new exit 119 about 2,000 feet further to the north, and then ties a new US-20 alignment back in at between Fremont and Science Center Drive. The one thing that has changed, you'll notice this little swoop right here that was not present if you are somebody who memorized the previous graphics, which I would be surprised if anybody did, except for me. The previous exit 119 came straight across at Olympia Street to provide that connection, but we realized in consultation with FAA that that was too close. That was in what they call the runway protection zone. And so we have modified that to move that out. of the runway protection zone. Otherwise, E3 is essentially the same alternative that we analyzed in the PEL. This is H2 as we are planning to analyze it right now. H2 moves the exit 119 or the system-to-system function from exit 119 up about 2 miles and provides the connection up there. This also has been changed slightly. The exact location of that system-to-system interchange is a little bit further north in the new alternative. Let's see, what's the other change? Oh, sorry, obvious. That also was set up to not preclude a new connection to the west. We are not planning to build that future connection to the west in the immediate future, but we are clearing that environmentally so that we know that it is possible for somebody to come back if at some point that was necessary. Yeah, there was also a very minor modification to the exact location where this alignment passed through the hatch pit based on some geotechnical analysis that we did supplemental to the PEL process. One other thing that's different for both alternatives, that as we're looking at the cross section, the potential widening, we are, because of the work that ITD is doing between Pocatello and Idaho Falls, we are accounting for the potential to have a third lane in the same alignment that we are providing here. So there is where...
this is now a 6-lane divided highway.
Yes, the proposal is that the footprint would allow for 6. Whether we build 2 and have the available right-of-way, but we would provide for...
What is the easement beyond a 6-lane divided highway? How much land are you going to buy out?
As little as possible, enough for drainage in some location, and some of those details we don't know yet, but they might have more if you ask them in the other rooms. There are some places that we already know that we would need to build walls or things to keep that footprint as narrow as possible. There are places like where it runs past the airport where it wouldn't be divided. We would actually push that together to minimize impacts to those properties that are on the west side of I-15. So exactly how tightly we can squeeze that is still something that we're working on. But to be conservative, when we're looking at impacts, like potentially to businesses or other properties, we're assuming that we have enough right-of-way for a third lane, so that's an as conservative as we can get assessment of where we would have impacts on businesses, properties, railroad, other things like that. Homes, yeah. Okay, last 3 slides, kind of where we are in the process. These are the major steps of the NEPA process. Notice of intent, public scoping, which is what we're doing here, and taking comments for the next week after this. Then we will take that input and complete our alternatives analysis over the next year and put together the draft environmental impact statement. The draft environmental impact statement then has a public hearing where you're invited to come in and comment on the recommendation of a preferred alternative. We then make that selection based on that input, codify that in the final environmental impact statement and record of decision. That process, as I mentioned before, happens over a 2-year time period, so we are doing our best to keep on track. That would mean that by August of 2024, we have a decision on what's going to be done, either the no build or one of the 2 build alternatives, or some modification to one of the 2 build alternatives that we've agreed on based on our impact analysis. After that design really takes the project to about a 30% design. So after that, there would be a year to 2 years, maybe possibly longer, to take the project from 30% design to a final design that could be bid out, and then construction would begin sometime after that. So we're probably about 4 years away, if not more, from any kind of construction occurring in the corridor. Future public engagement opportunities, we're going to keep meeting with the community working group, continue making presentations to the MPO, City Council, Like I said, we'll have that public hearing will occur. That's one of the mandatory steps that occurs during when the draft environmental impact statement is released. We will take the comments that we get from folks tonight and not only use them in our analysis as we're going through our analysis, but respond to those through, we'll post a frequently asked questions and responses list on the website. And then we're all, throughout the entire process, we will take comments via email at our project email website and try to be as responsive as we can with those. A little recap for tonight. So after this, you will walk back out. Micah will help take you back out into the other room, break into a couple of groups, walk through and see some of these boards in more detail, have the opportunity to ask a few more questions. And then you go into the third room. The third room has some animation, some fly-through videos of what these two alternatives look like, which I think will really help, because the other thing that the 2D graphics don't really do justice for is some of the structures and other things that are anticipated to be needed for both of the build alternatives. And there are some other subject matter experts in there. The traffic engineer that did the work on this analysis, some of the design engineers are in there. And I think are some environmental folks as well. So, yeah.
Has any additional traffic study been done since they added the additional lane off of I-15 on exit 118? And how does that factor into the no-build alternative?
Oh, it's definitely part of the no build because it's in place already, and so that will become the new baseline, and so we'll be then that's different.
Has that been studied? Is that incorporated into the data we're receiving today, or no?
It's not part of that slide. There isn't any additional traffic data because the new traffic analysis has just started. Since we just started the project in August, we don't have answers yet, but that will become the new baseline. So the improvements will be compared to that, not compared to what the original 2017 traffic was. So that'll be the difference there. Yeah, that's new.
Are there any eminent domain issues on either of the build projects or build recommendations?
Both of them would have right-of-way impacts, not necessarily eminent domain. There can be voluntary sales that don't require the actual eminent domain process. There are differences between the two, and we're also just beginning the minimization, avoidance and minimization process. So we'd be looking at, kind of as I pointed out, if there are places where we can build walls or get rid of medians in order to not have those impacts, that's the goal. Okay, I will release you. You can follow Micah in and continue the conversation. Thank you.